The first cottage we stayed in was Ardlui Church. It was beautiful inside and out, and the amount of food and wine, etc. the lady that owns it left us was outstanding. It had a beautiful garden with a small stream running through it and birds singing, etc. And it stood at the top of Loch Lomond. These are the Falls of Falloch, which are just up the road, about 10 minutes from Ardlui Church. Our first day trip from Ardlui Church was to Oban, and we passed two remarkable lochs, Loch Awe and Loch Etive, which were beautiful. Our second trip from Ardlui is to Killin. On the way we did a little detour and went to Loch Earn to have a look at it. It was very, very beautiful. In Killin, beyond the bridge, are the Falls of Dochart, which are quite good and nice to see. But on the way back we saw some wonderful views towards Crane Larrick. This is the drove us in a few minutes away by car up the road from Ardlui. It looks a bit rough, but it does amazing meals. The staff are very nice. It's the oldest pub I think we've been in, and it has stuffed things all over the place, like this stuffed golden eagle of immense age. Sadly, after 7 days, we're leaving Ardlui and making our way to Balmain, which is a village 4.5 miles outside Drumnadrochit, for the Glenview of Enric House. Glenview is a lovely place. It's modern, different to Ardlui, but really beautiful. And we met the owners, and they're very, very nice. We took a 40-minute trip on a boat on Loch Ness. It was really delightful and informative. Did you know that you can bury 3 times the world's population, which is billions of people, in the vast waters of Loch Ness and lose them completely? Unfortunately, there weren't any sightings of any type of monster whatsoever. We took a short trip down the road to Fort Augustus, where we had some beautiful fish and chips, I think the best we've ever had. This is the last of the lock gates out of Fort Augustus into Loch Ness, towards Inverness. These form part of the Caledonian Canal, which stretches right across Scotland from one side at the west to the other side at the east. As you can see, there is a swing road bridge to open before any boat can progress. It takes quite a while to open and can cause serious traffic holdups. That's why boats queue up to go through together. We were told by a local that every Thursday, I think he said, a cruise ship comes through the locks on its own, purely because that's the only ship that can get into the lock at any one time. We wished these boat captains and their crews nice sailing on Loch Ness and further beyond. Our next trip was to Fort William, and we passed two lochs, Loch Lochy and Loch Linney, which were both beautiful lochs, but as you can see, it wasn't a very fine day. And when we got to Fort William, we weren't too struck on Fort William either, but it was worth seeing the two lochs. Our next trip from Glenview was to the Isle of Skye. On the way, we stopped at Alder Crewin for a bit of breakfast. Carrying on, we then saw these Highland cattle and stopped to look. There was a small bus of people wandering around and feeding them. Of course, Julia asked the driver for a carrot to feed them with, and she got one, and she did. On the way, we passed this beautiful loch, Loch Duick, which is a sea loch. We arrived at Portree Harbour and had a look round. We could see the coloured houses up above the harbour, but I mean they weren't much, and Portree wasn't up to much really at all. After leaving the island by the Kyles of Loch Alsh, we came across Loch Long, which is a sort of derivative of Loch Duish, and Dorney, a small village on the loch. We were going to have lunch there, but everywhere had stopped serving. But I was lucky enough to get a glimpse of the heron fishing amongst all the weed in the loch. On the way back to Glenview, we saw some beautiful views, like this of the Five Sisters, or looking south towards the Great Glen. After 7 days, we're sadly leaving Glenview and the wildlife around, as you can see. Booked a cottage at Inverleil, just off Loch Broom, for 3 days. When we got there, we were glad we only took it for 3 days because it was pretty dismal, the cottage. These are two lochs that we passed on the way. There were Loch Luichart and Loch Glascarnock, which were both quite beautiful. This is the inland part of Loch Broom, which is a sea loch. This is a ferry alongside in Ullapool Bay. If you look to the right of this picture, you can just see the bridge of the Venus, which is just coming into dock. The Venus is part of the Viking shipping line. She is welcomed into the harbour by a flourish of water spouts. Once anchored off, she starts disembarking her passengers to look around Ullapool, which has lots and lots of trinket shops. There were lots of nationalities on the Venus, from Americans to Italians to Indians to Chinese. One of the reasons to go to Ullapool was to visit the seafood shack, and we had lunch there. But as it was Sunday, the menu was small to choose from. Leaving Inverleith behind us, we took the decision to go to our next cottage, Lower Thura House, just north of Wick, by the picturesque route. We passed Ardmere Point at Ullapool and joined the A835 and then the A837 past Loch Assynt, which is a wonderful loch. Then at Loch Inver, we took the B869, which is one of the most scenic routes in Britain. The trouble being is that it is a one-track road with passing places for quite a few miles. The B689 can be a bit scary to drive along, but the inlets, beaches and views are well worth the trouble. Called in at Caelescew, a little village on Loch Glendu, and had a crab lunch, which was rather nice. We thought about taking the boat trip to see the falls on the other side of the loch, then changed our minds in the end. These 4 wild deer jumped over the car, then over the fence on the lady's garden, and it was quite nice to see them because they're quite rare nowadays. We then took the road that goes right across the top of Scotland to Thurso and down to the cottage. It took us about 7 hours to do the whole journey. This turned out to be Julia's favourite cottage of the lot, I think. It had a conservatory and a lounge, a big utility room, huge downstairs bathroom, and a large downstairs bedroom, as well as 2 bedrooms upstairs and a bathroom for me. We had many a happy half hour watching the electric grass cutter outside doing its job. It was wonderful. Caithness is rather nice. It's full of farms, but it's very, very flat. Our first trip out from Lothura House was to Wick, and we weren't very taken by Wick, but the harbour was quite nice. The second trip we took from Lothura House was to John O'Groats. This is the Pentland Venture, our cruise ship, and when we moved away from the harbour, there was a wonderful view of the Weird hotel on the land. Right along the cliffs there were thousands of guillemots preparing to nest. There are 4 Duncansby stacks, one of them with a waterfall running through it. These cliffs are mainly made up of ironstone, which is prone to rockfalls, as you can see. Guillemots can live an average of 23 years. They eat mainly sprats, crustaceans, worms and mollusks. Next, the captain decided to steer us into a cave, which is quite dangerous, but at the same time exciting. The noise was deafening. As we came out, I managed to take a photo of 3 puffins, although it's slightly out of focus, sitting on the cliffs. The water you could see dripping in the caves was actually water seeping down from 100 feet above. Although we didn't see any whales or porpoises or otters, we had a wonderful time on the trip and thanked the captain when we got back to John O'Groats. About 2/3 of the way to Invergordon, we called in on the Golspie Inn and had lunch there. It was very, very nice. We've arrived at Heathfield Cottage and it's very, very nice, although it's in the complex. But Julia has a lovely downstairs bedroom and she's quite happy, so am I. On the first day, we went into Invergordon, which is rather a nice little town. We walked down to the docks and there's 2 huge cruise ships in, which produce an awful lot of money for the town. On the second day of our stay, my laptop crashed. So we took it to a computer shop called Omniscot in Dingwall, which is about 10 miles away, nice little town. And I got it back working perfectly the next day, which I was very grateful for. Whilst we were in the computer shop, we mentioned that we hadn't seen many deer while on holiday. One of the lads told us about this place, the Novar Estate in Ashness, which is only a couple of miles away, where you can drive round and see their herd of deer. Unfortunately, this was a long-range shot, as this was the closest we could get to them. As part of the grounds of the cottages, there is a small loch called Loch Clashdhu, which is a matter of 30 seconds walk from the cottage. There is also a walk around the woods, which we didn't do, but we stayed around the loch, which we walked around a couple of times while we were at the cottage. The walks were very good, and we stopped and sat a few times and enjoyed the bird songs and also the sounds of the countryside. Julia decided she needed to get her hair done and found a shop online in Bewley, just outside Inverness. Whilst we were there, we went into a lovely Italian coffee shop and had some beautiful coffee. It was delightful. While Julia was getting her hair done, I scouted out a ferrule for the end of her stick, which was worn out. Julia was delighted with the cut she got at the hairdresser's and said she enjoyed being looked after in that way. Whilst in the hairdresser's, we were told about a farm shop at Dalmore, just a few miles away. So on our last day at the cottage, we went there and we had a really pleasant hour there and seeing all the animals. Our next cottage was booked for 3 days, which in the end was a blessing. It was situated in a village called Cooper Angus, about 5 miles from Blairgowrie, where it was supposed to be. When we eventually found it, it was like a lodge house at the end of a drive to a large property. I had booked an early arrival and was to pay the lady owner £30. However, it took us forever to find it, and it was 2:45 by the time we got there. So for this reason, I was going to dispute this payment. To cut a long story short, there was no heating on the building for the 3 days we were there. When you tried to use the toaster, it blew all the electrics. We never saw anyone belonging to the property and left at 8 a.m. on the final day, as it was warmer in the car than it was in the cottage. Whilst we were at the cottage, we visited the brewer shop with its bagpiper statue. The shop was amazing, but very expensive. Among other things, we purchased some honey. On getting home, we tried the honey, and it was by far the best we have ever had. On the same day, we saw the carvings at Blair Athol, which were rather nice. And we visited Pitlochry, which we have stayed in a few times many years ago. Of course, Julia went in the Edinburgh Woolen Mill shop and did a bit of shopping while she was there, which was nice. On the last day of our stay, we decided to go to Glamis Castle, the home of the Queen Mother. We took the tour, and although it was up and down stairs quite a lot, we enjoyed it, and we were glad we'd done it. On the evening of that day, we decided to go to the McClure Arms, which is only about 2 miles away from the cottage, and we had a beautiful meal. And thanks to everybody that served us there, they were wonderful. Leaving Blairgowrie, we went to Hoyk and the Mansfield House Hotel, where we had a few drinks and an evening meal, which was delightful. We left the next morning en route to home, 31 days after we left. We are glad and sad to be back, but we love our home and what it stands for.